It sounds like Wulfen are out and Thunderwolf cavalry are in this season. Today we'll be looking at that and more in our full review of Index Space Wolves. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy focused 40k channel, where we're all about getting the most out of our miniatures on the tabletop. I've been looking forward to making this one for a while. We're going to be taking a full look at Index Astartes Space Wolves and going over all the changes to the Sons of Russ in this kind of interim patch codex before their actual codex supplement comes out. In the review we'll talk about the general things that are included in the index and what isn't, briefly go through all of the many changes to the datasheets, and then talk a little bit about the Stratagems and Relics. Without further ado, let's jump straight into it. So Index Astartes Space Wolves is a PDF document that was brought out by Games Workshop to allow Space Wolves to remain functional with the new Space Marine Codex while they wait for their actual supplement. In terms of current rules, it is a complete replacement for Codex Space Wolves and Saga of the Beast, though it's somewhat of an incomplete replacement because it doesn't have some important options from the Codex, such as Relics, Warlord traits and Stratagems. All of those and the Space Wolf Psychic discipline is missing at the moment. It will likely return with the Codex, maybe in a new and updated form. Hopefully the Saga system will be reworked somewhat, as the Warlord traits were just a little bit weird compared with other codexes, and very restrictive, having to try and do certain deeds before you got the full effect of them. In the meantime, certain Stratagems and Relics will be missed quite a lot. The Wulfen Stone was a really useful one for getting +1 attack. Seekia Saga was amazing for characters killing big things, and Lone Wolf was a really fun and fluffy stratagem and will certainly be missed. Hopefully all of these will come back and more when their actual supplement is released. Otherwise, things that aren't included are that there are no successor chapter rules, much like there are in Blood Angels and Dark Angels, because of course Space Wolves in the fluff don't really have successor chapters, and there are some datasheets that are gone compared with Codex Space Wolves. Probably the biggest loss is Njal in Runic Armour. You can only take him as a Terminator now, and also some of the named versions of the special characters, such as Rune Priests, Wolf Priests, Iron Priests. None of those are included. You just use the generic Librarian, Chaplain and Tech Marine datasheets now, and some of them do have special options written onto them for Space Wolves. For example, the Tech Marine can take a Tempest Hammer if he is Space Wolves only. Swift Claws and Attack Bikes aren't in here either. They'll now be represented by the standard Codex Space Marines, so we'll lose Berserk Charge, but on the plus side at least they'll have Ballistic Skill and Weapon Skill 3+ now. Wolf Scouts are also not in here, so again will be taken by the standard Scout Squad. Slightly disappointingly, Frost weapons seem to have been removed as per the special close combat weapons. Previously, Frost Axes and Frost Swords and things, they were all the standard power weapons but +1 strength, and now the standard power weapons and power axes and things all get +1 strength anyway, so I guess perhaps they didn't really know what to do with them. It's a bit of a shame to have them lose their own unique abilities, but in all honesty it's still a buff to Space Wolves really. They get the upgraded stats on the weapons and they don't have to pay any more for them. So quite a lot of things that aren't included, but I would bear in mind the amount of things that Space Wolves have gained. Being part of Codex Space Marines really does have its benefits. They've got access to a whole load of units that they never had access to before, things like Thunderfire Cannons, Centurions and Storm Ravens, to name just a few, and also tons and tons of options in terms of generic rules for Codex Space Marines, such as Relics, including the Teeth of Terror, which is a nice chainsaw that I'm sure a lot of Space Wolf players would like to get their hands on. The generic Codex Warlord traits, Imperium Sword could be really nice for a fighty Wolf Lord, the full complement of Stratagems from Codex Space Marines, and also the Librarius Discipline for psychic powers. The new rules for Psychic Fortress could be pretty handy for getting the Wolves across the table safely. So if we finally get onto the rules that are actually for Space Wolves, I'd remember that the chapter tactic has been redone. Space Wolves now all get Heroic Intervention at 3 inches, and they retain their +1 to hit special rule on the first round of the fight phase. The Heroic Intervention thing is really nice. It means that your opponent just can't afford to put a unit right next to a Space Wolves unit to steal an objective or something, as you know that you'll be able to consolidate into them and try and kill them. It does mean characters have lost that 6-inch Heroic Intervention trait, but Space Wolves have retained the Countercharge stratagem, which means that for 1 command point you can still get a 6-inch Heroic Intervention on any unit you want, and between the two rules it means that the opponents really aren't going to want to put units anywhere near your miniatures in-game. One of the biggest changes that affects multiple units in the Codex is the Swift Hunters rule. Basically anything that sat on a wolf has gained this, whether it's Thunderwolf Cavalry, Wolf Lords on Thunderwolves, the various special characters, and Cyber Wolves and Fenrisian Wolves. This one's a really nice rule, and it allows all of your Wolf-born units to advance and charge, and also have +1 to pile in and then consolidate moves. Advancing and charging as if you're some sort of White Scar is just really good. It takes your average threat range from a Thunderwolf charge from being 17 inches up to 20 inches, and you can potentially use command points to both reroll the advance and the charge roll if you really want the maximal range of threat. Honestly, this is just such a good rule, and I'd say that this alone is enough to make Thunderwolf cavalry far more viable, even before we get into the fact that they've gained an extra wound. Finally, in terms of other rules, we have the relics from Saga of the Beast, the vast majority pretty much unchanged, and 7 of the unique stratagems from Saga of the Beast have also made it through. Again, these ones largely unchanged. The majority of the supplement is taken up by the 28 unique datasheets for Space Wolves, so let's go through them and the notable changes now. Let's start with the big news then, the core shock assault of the Space Wolf army, the Wulfen and the Thunderwolves. I'm afraid to say that Wulfen really have taken a beating with this update and lost a lot of things that made them good. Points have decreased somewhat to make up for this. Your standard Wulfen will now cost you 25 points, a Thunderhammer and Storm Shield will cost you 41, and one with the Great Frost Axe is now 33 points from 38. Don't get me wrong, their damage output is still pretty excellent, but they have lost quite a lot of abilities. First of all, their durability is significantly worse. Wulfen are now Toughness 5 now, which is a buff, but they lost their 5+ Feel No Pain from Death Frenzy, and the Storm Shield nerf coming into effect for them really does hamper their durability. Rather than having a 3+ invul save, that's now nerfed to a 3+ armor save and a 4+ invul. They're a lot easier to gun down now, particularly with Strength 5 or Strength 6 weapons. Heavy bolters are absolutely going to chew through them. Death Frenzy has been nerfed as well. You can only use it if the model hasn't already fought in the fight phase, so you only get those extra attacks when you die if the enemy is the one attacking first and the Wulfen have yet to strike. I guess they just wanted to cut down on multiple activations per fight phase. They've also gained Bestial Rage, which means they can't do actions like raising banners or things if they need to. They don't have the core keyword, meaning no buffs or rerolls for Wolf Priests or Wolf Lords, and their buffing ability has lost the ability to give extra attacks to nearby units, though they do retain rerolling charge rolls for nearby units. So multiple nerfs here, but their damage output has arguably got a little bit better. Their Savage Fury rule now allows the Shock Assault to always be active, so it means they'll continue to be very nasty in multiple rounds of combat if they live that long. And it also means that the Assault Doctrine is always active for them as well, which is pretty useful for getting a bit of extra AP on their attacks, particularly good as Thunderhammers have gone from AP 3 to AP-2 now. Overall, I would say that this is a decent nerf to Wulfen. In general, they're going to be just as dangerous point for point as they ever were in close combat. Their damage output is still really good, they're just nowhere near as survivable as they were, so they're just not quite as good for just running up into the middle of the board and fighting for objectives. If we turn our attention to the Thunderwolves now though, things have got quite a lot better for them. The standard Thunderwolf cavalry is 45 points now, so unchanged, and the Storm Shield and Thunderhammer combo has dropped a bit, though admittedly the Storm Shield and Thunderhammer have both got a little bit weaker in the new rules. The unit got some significant buffs though. Swift Hunters allows them to advance and charge as we've said, and they went up to 4 wounds, which is really quite a significant durability buff, particularly if you are behind a 4+ invul. The Wolf's Crushing Jaw attacks are now AP-2, which is nice. And Storm Shields will only cost you an extra 5 points per cavalry guy, which seems like a pretty decent deal for me, for getting 2+ saves and 4+ invuls on that many wounds. Other than Thunderhammers, most of their other weapons did get a buff as well. Things like Lightning Claws and Astartes Chainsaws are looking really decent for them. Maybe you could have a couple of cheaper wolves to remove as the first casualties, tanking for something with a Thunderhammer and Storm Shield or something. Finally, to cement their advantage further over Wulfen, they do have the core keyword, so you can run them up alongside Wolf Lords and Wolf Guard Battle Leaders on Thunderwolves. I feel like these guys are going to be seeing quite a lot of play. Moving on, let's take a look at some of the other core units for Codex Space Wolves. If we stick with the elites, then Wolfguard Terminators are looking really interesting. They're 33 points a model, they're very durable point for point now with 3 wounds at that 2+ save, and Space Wolves Wolfguard are some of the most flexible Terminators in the game. Getting +1 to hit is excellent with Power Fists, Chain Fists and Thunderhammers, and because their war gear is so de-restricted, you can take some really interesting combos such as Stormbolter Storm Shield Terminators, Lightning Claw Storm Shield, or Power Fist Storm Shield. I really like the way that you can build the unit basically how you like, maybe with a few cheaper guys with Storm Shields to tank hits, and some big damage dealers hiding behind their tankiness and hopefully surviving to make it into close combat. I think that Power Armoured Space Wolves are some of the bigger winners of the index as well. All of them gained 2 wounds, usually at not too great a points cost, and I think that all of these are looking very playable and competitive now, compared with their Primaris brothers. Grey Hunters are 18 points and cost 1 point extra if you want an Astartes Chainsword, giving you the very interesting option of having a guy with Astartes Chainsword and a bolt gun. Blood Claws are 18 points and Sky Claws are 20, and they can essentially hit as hard as Assault Intercessors on the charge, due to getting that +1 attack. Quite interesting that you can take big units of these guys as well, could be interesting to have some character blobs go along with that. Wolfguard, much like Vanguard veterans as well, are looking great. They're 19 points a pop, or 21 with a jump pack. Again, I really like their flexibility to be able to mix and match things like Storm Shields and Storm Bolters alongside their regular close combat weapons. And finally, Longfangs have been changed a bit and are now a bit more in line with the Space Marine Devastator squad. They don't have their innate rerolls, but they do get access to Armorium Cherubs and the Signum now, so they've essentially been changed to a Space Marine Devastator squad that can also take a Wolfguard or Terminator pack leader. They can take Grav Cannons finally now as well, which is a pretty nice little addition. Fenrisian Wolves and Cyber Wolves are unchanged in points cost, but they did gain Swift Hunters, still potentially usable as some cheap chaff units if the Space Wolves want them, and could be a bit better at getting into nuisance close combats with that advance and charge rule, though they're still not exactly great in terms of damage output or survivability. Moving on to vehicles now. Bjorn the Fellhanders is looking better than ever to me. He'll now cost you between 175 and 195 points, depending on whether you give him the las cannon, and he's looking ridiculously tanky, retaining that 5+ Feel No Pain, and also gaining Duty Eternal, which also the other Dreadnoughts gained as well. I think he's done very well out of the update. He only lost the 1 command point bonus that you get for including him in the army, but he retained his rerolls. I think that you could potentially get both Captain and Lieutenant style rerolls out of him, as you could use Wisdom of the Ancients to get everyone rerolling hit rolls and wound rolls of 1 when they're within 6 inches. Finally, his Hellfrost cannon's been buffed to D3+3 damage if you use the focused beam, and Hellfrost weapons across the board have gone up to 36 inch range, up from 24. Overall, to me, Bjorn is looking like a really decent include in a Space Wolves army now, getting far tankier and going down in points in this update. For the other Dreadnoughts, Murderfang has gone up in points quite a bit, up to 150 from 125. He has gained Duty Eternal, which is nice, but I'm not sure that it was 25 points worth of nice. Both Murderfang and the Wulfen Dreadnought have both gained Bestial Rage, which means that they can't do actions. The Wulfen Dreadnought has gone down slightly in points, which in combination with Duty Eternal means that I'd say that it's better. Also, the Great Frost Axe has been buffed, much like the Venerable Dreadnought in Codex Space Marines. If you use it on Cleave mode, then it does D3+3 damage now. A bunch of Wolfy Dreadnoughts running up alongside a Tech Marine could be a really fun way to run a Space Wolves list. As for the Flyers, things aren't quite so good news, I'm afraid. The Stormfang gunship was priced very low due to a Games Workshop error in pricing missiles. You could take the thing for 200 points when 9th edition came out. Unfortunately, that has been redressed. It's now between 300 or 350, depending on exactly what upgrades you give it. And the 2 sets of twin multi-melters that you could give it had now been slightly nerfed, arguably. They're now melter arrays. Basically a D3 shot multi-melter, so pretty much the same power as a standard multi-melter is anyway. I guess maybe they felt like it might be a bit too powerful to have 8 melter shots coming out of this thing. The Hellfrost Destructor has received a bit of a buff. Again, its 36 inch range, and its 2-shot focus beam is now strength 10 and an awesome flat 6 damage. While this sounds really good on paper, I still think that the Stormfang is weaker than before. The points changes have gone up significantly, and it's lost access to Vengeance the Machine Spirits to get it to auto-explode, and Storm Strike, the option that gave you lots of rerolls on the Hellfrost cannon. The more transport-orientated Stormwolf is in a fairly similar place, to be honest. Again, the Hellfrost has been buffed slightly, but it's also gone up in points a small amount, and it still seems fairly pricey for delivering Space Wolves into battle. Now let's talk about some Space Wolves characters then. Starting with Logan Grimnar himself, both versions have gone up in points very slightly. On foot, he's now 155 from 150, and he has also received a couple of nerfs to his buffing abilities, mainly the new Chapter Master wording, which means he only gives 4 rerolls to 1 unit. He also no longer gives Fearless to Wolfguard, but he's got a bit better in close combat. With that Axe Morkai, the 2-handed profile no longer gives him -1 to hit, so it's just an excellent all-round close combat weapon. And the 1-handed profile is now an absolute horde blender. It gives him double the amount of attacks, so typically 12 attacks with Shock Assault at strength 6, AP -3 and damage 1. He's going to cut through a lot of infantry like that. Stormrider has received all of these changes as well. It's gone up to 180 points from 165, and its durability has increased fairly proportionately, now being 14 wounds, as well as the buffs to Logan's fighting strength. It's also gained Swift Hunters for advancing and charging, so he could be across the battlefield very quickly indeed. The wolf attacks no longer degrade as he takes damage, and they have also gained AP -2. Although finally he is a chariot, not a vehicle, meaning that he can't be repaired by Iron Priests. Honestly, I think that Stormrider is looking like a lot better of an option. Very fast and will absolutely destroy the enemy when he gets into close combat. The main issue really is still the durability. Will he just get gunned down before he gets there? I guess he could be good if you're absolutely trying to overload the enemy, if you can pile multiple pressing threats at the enemy so they don't know which to shoot first. Perhaps having a trio of Invicta tactical warsuits around or something could give him the breathing space he needs to move up the board. I'm afraid that Arjak Rockfist hasn't done terribly well out of these changes. He's gone up from 115 points to 120, and while he retains his lieutenant-style rerolls, he's lost the extra attack aura that he used to give to Wolfguard. That's a shame, as it meant he was an excellent character for leading Wolfguard units into battle, and now he's just a bit more generic. The Anvil Shield has retained the old Storm Shield rules, so this is a 3+ save and no boost to his saving throw. Though Foe Hammer has got significantly better, it's now flat 3 damage at AP-3, and that goes to damage 4 versus characters and monsters. So a bit fightier, but I would still say a little bit worse overall, seeing as he has lost that extra attacks aura. Ragnar Blackmane has gone up a few more points to 130. Generally he still remains an absolutely great choice, and he's likely very pleased that Touch of the Wild has still remained, meaning he can still get a ludicrous amount of attacks. He was good before, and he still remains very good now. As we mentioned, Njal has lost the option to take the runic armor version of him, so you have to take the Terminator one. I suspect he won't be taken all that much in the meantime with the loss of the Space Wolves' unique discipline. He has also received a slight nerf as well, with his runic Terminator armor only giving him a 5+ invul and not a 4+ anymore. The Staff of the Stormcaller has been buffed slightly, going to strength 7, AP-2 and damage D3, though he still isn't exactly the most fighty character in melee comparatively. I'd say probably the best use of him is giving a 5+ invul save to nearby units as they footslog up the board. Ulrich the Slayer is the only Wolf Priest in the book. He's 110 points from 100, though sadly he's lost access to his healing balms. The Slayer's Oath has been changed a bit. He now auto-passes Listeners if he's killed a character or monster in-game, which is a nice to have I guess, though I don't think it'll come up all that commonly. He's a Master of Sanctity and knows 2 Litanies, and his Crozius is now strength 6, AP-2 and flat 2 damage. Honestly, I think he's got quite a bit worse with the points rise and losing his healing ability. Next we have Crom Dragongaze, who's up to 100 points from 90, and I still think he's a fairly reasonable pickup if you just want a cheap Wolflord on foot. His stat line is unchanged, though Wormclaw is now strength 7, AP-2 and flat 2 damage, so pretty decent against most things, and that Fierce Eye ability now gives -1 to combat attrition tests for enemy units within 3 inches. I think he's okay for a cheap Footlord, but I think that most people will be tempted to take things like Power Fists or Thunderhammers on a more generic one. Next up we have Canis Wolfborn. He's changed a bit in role. He is now 120 points from 110, and now no longer has his Wolfguard Battle Leader rerolls for rerolling 1s to wound. Other than this though, he's become a significantly fightier combatant. He also gains Swift Hunters for getting into the fray very quickly, AP-2 on his Wolf attacks. He's gone up to 6 attacks, and those Wolf Claws are now damaged 2. With the built-in ability to reroll wound rolls, he's pretty much guaranteed to stack several wounds on virtually anything in the game. Unlike the rest of the Space Wolf characters, he's retained an innate 6-inch heroic intervention, and he always fights first when he's within engagement range of characters. So he's pretty much changed quite a lot. He's now a lot more of a single lone combatant, but you can't also use him to buff nearby units. Overall, I think he's quite interesting, though I don't know whether he's quite enough to stand out from the crowd. His other Thunderwolf mounted rival is Harold Deathwolf, who does have the Captain style rerolls, and his Frost Axe Glacius is strength 6, AP-2 and 2 damage, and it now also inflicts mortal wounds on the wound roll of a 6. The Mantle of the Troll King means that he's really quite hard to shift now. The Storm Shield will give him a 4+ invul save and a 2+ armor save, and the Mantle gives him -1 to damage, so with 7 wounds he's going to be a pain to get rid of. I think he'll compete quite well with standard Wolflords on Thunderwolves. His damage output isn't quite as spectacular, but he's just incredibly tough. Finally, for named characters, we have Lucas the Trickster, who I do think has got a lot better in this update. Lucas has gone down in points, 80 points from 85. He's gained an attack with that Claw of the Jackal Wolf, even if they are essentially just boosted chainsword attacks. But he's gained a really powerful new aura, which is a fully fledged 6-inch aura that gives full hit rerolls for Blood Claws, Sky Claws and Swift Claws in melee when they're within 6 inches of him. Honestly, he's now just a really good character for leading these units into battle. At just 80 points, I could easily see him run up alongside a few big units of these guys. Other than that, he still has his decent special rules. That Stasis Bomb could be fun if he does die in close combat, and his Pelt of the Doppelganger has changed just a little bit. He's now no longer -1 to hit, but he's only ever wounded on the roll of a 4+. Overall, much improved, and I could certainly see people wanting to run him now. Finally, for the non-unique special characters, we have a Wolflord on Thunderwolf, gone up a little bit to 110, but well worth it for the advance and charge. The Wolfguard Battle Leader on Thunderwolf, who's 95 points, and the Wolfguard Battle Leader in Terminator armor, who's 85 points now, and I guess is a relevant inclusion as you can't get Terminator Lieutenants in the standard Space Marine army. I think it's relevant that Thunderhammers have gone down in points quite a bit on these. They're only 20 points now, even if they did lose a pip of AP, so I think they'll be taken more. And Storm Shields are 10 points. I would most certainly think about taking one on the Wolfguard Battle Leader on Thunderwolf. He'd just be 125 points for a really fast, tough, and scary unit in melee. Overall, from the various datasheets, I think that Thunderwolves are going to be played loads more. Wolfguard Terminators, Grey Hunters and Bloodclaws are looking better than ever. Bjorn and the Wulfen Dreadnought are looking like some of the picks of the vehicle pool. And from the characters, Logan Grimnar, Ragnar Blackmane, Harold Deathwolf, Lucas the Trickster, and the generic characters on Thunderwolves look really interesting to me. Finally, let's just briefly talk about Stratagems and Relics. There are 7 stratagems from Saga of the Beast that survived the Purge. Pack Hunters gives you some rerolls on Fenrisian Wolves and is probably the worst of the lot. Touch of the Wild is almost always going to be worth it when you have a fighty character in close combat for extra hits. Vicious Executioners can give you mortal wounds on 6s for Wolfguard, which could be really interesting now Lightning Claws have got good. You could basically double your chances of getting 6s against a lot of targets. Death Grip Bite gives you damage to Thunderwolf bites, certainly more relevant now Thunderwolves have got a lot better and they're also AP -2. Knowledge of the Foe is still an auto-include if you kill characters in close combat. Who doesn't like auto-refunding command points? Countercharge still gives you that 6-inch threat around all of your units, and Crushing Assault could be good for an extra couple of mortal wounds if you make a big Thunderwolf cavalry charge. Maybe not the most useful one though, because if you are making a massive Thunderwolf cavalry charge, you might just kill what you were making contact with anyway. Finally, in terms of Relics of the Fang, most of these are completely unchanged from Saga of the Beast, but you've lost all of the ones from the Codex. The Morkai's Teeth Bolts are my favourite of the bunch. They'll allow you to reroll wound rolls of 1 against 1 target, and they're quite an interesting one because that can also be used on non-core units. If you were using a few gunline tanks or units, then this could be a good way of amping up their damage. For the others, the Mastercrafted Weapon for an extra damage Thunderhammer or something is decent. The Wolftail Talisman could be good for messing with some enemy psychic, and I quite like the Mountain Breaker Helm for some near guaranteed extra mortal wounds whenever your character fights. In any case, I look forward to seeing the return of some other stratagems and hopefully some new options when the full supplement comes out. So overall, I'd say that Space Wolves really aren't in too bad a place following this update. Thunderwolves, Core Troops, Terminators and Dreadnoughts are looking really solid. It is a shame about what happened to Wulfen and a few other characters. Let me know what you think of the rules, or if you've had any experience using the new rules in-game so far. I'd be really interested to hear what you have to say. And feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics if you'd like to see more similar videos like this. Finally, if you have been getting good value out of these videos, I'd just like to mention that I do have a Patreon page for the channel, which you can find down in the video description below. Channel Patrons get to see a new video early each week, there's regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and you also get entered to the regular Auspex Tactics prize giveaway, which happens every single month. If any of that sounds interesting, or you'd just like to help support the channel, then the link is down in the video description below. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.